Connor Bedard scores in his first game at the United Center, but the Blackhawks drop their home opener 5-3. I'll go over my full thoughts from the loss to Vegas, and we'll also discuss the mini forward logjam that Coach Luke Richardson has on his hands. All that and plenty more right here on Locked On Blackhawks.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everyone? Welcome on in to another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Jack Bushman. You can go and give me a follow on X at Jack Bushman2, or you can go and check out my Strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey for all the latest Blackhawks news and updates. And as always, please make sure to go and show some support if you haven't done so already. Go and smash that like button, comment down below for me, and of course, subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. I'm really trying to grow those numbers right now, and showing some support won't cost you anything. Subscribing to the channel is 100% for free, so please go and help your boy out. And you can also go and turn on those push notifications to get notified when the episode gets uploaded each and every day. In today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks is brought to you by the Sleeper app, the go-to platform for daily fantasy sports. And right now you can use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps, and you'll get an $100 match with your first deposit. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps with Sleeper. All right, good afternoon, everyone. As always, thank you all for joining me on another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, your one-stop shop for all things Chicago Blackhawks. I hope everyone out there had themselves just a magnificent weekend. And of course, over the weekend, the Chicago Blackhawks finally had a home opener of their own. They were back at the United Center, and great to see a full slew of fans on tap for not only the Blackhawks' first game at the UC this season, but of course, Connor Bedard's first official NHL game on home ice as well. We did get to see him in the preseason, but goes without saying this one is a little bit more important. And what a start Connor Bedard got the Blackhawks faithful off to. They get the power play just over a minute into the game. Taylor Hall wins a puck battle in the corner, and bam, Connor Bedard is on the board less than 2 minutes in his first game's worth of action on home ice. His second goal of the season. Had to feel good for Bedard to see that one go in. Another situation where kind of gets the monkey off his back early, right? There isn't going to be any discussion of, oh, well, when is that first goal at the UC going to happen? No, he got that one out of the way, kind of similar to his first NHL goal as well. So I'm sure that one felt good for Bedard. And it was also nice to see him score on a wrist shot for the first time this season, considering his first NHL goal obviously came via wraparound up in Boston. And despite having the most 5-on-5 scoring chances here in the early going this season, Connor Bedard just struggled to get that finished product and hadn't had a wrist shot of his find the back of the net until Saturday night against Vegas. An absolute howitzer of a shot blown past the glove low of Stanley Cup winner Adin Hill. Not too shabby. And yeah, Bedard gets the Blackhawks out to an early 1-0 lead, gets the Madhouse at Madison rocking. Good to see Bedard get that first one on home ice. And also good to see him score on a wrister, and good to see the Blackhawks top power play unit finally cash in after they looked pretty dreadful and had come up empty through their first 5 games of the season. They came out early and really set the tone with a huge power play goal for the Blackhawks in the opening couple of minutes. But speaking of power plays, this was kind of my key storyline of the game, was how many penalties they were. I mean, there were so many penalties called. Both teams had 5 power play opportunities, 10 penalties total in this game. And that was kind of just my biggest takeaway, is there wasn't really a lot of time spent at 5-on-5, and there wasn't really a good pace or flow to this game. There were just so many whistles with the icings and the penalties and all that stuff. But when the game was at 5-on-5, I thought the Blackhawks did a pretty good job of going toe-to-toe with the defending Stanley Cup champs. It kind of felt similar to the matchup against the Toronto Maple Leafs when the Blackhawks went in Toronto and defeated them last week. I thought Vegas was probably the crisper and the cleaner team in the opening 20 minutes, but the Blackhawks were showing their heart and showing their resiliency and were right there with not only the defending champs, but a team that also has yet to lose here at the start of the regular season. So a pretty impressive start and a pretty impressive night for the Blackhawks at 5-on-5. But the special teams is ultimately what ended up killing them a little bit. Just a couple of minutes after Bedard's opening power play goal, Vegas went on to score on a man advantage of their own as William Karlsson tied the game 1-1 after the first period. Each team went on to score one goal in the middle frame. Jonathan Marchessault, Conn Smythe winner, was the one to put Vegas ahead 2-1, but then the Blackhawks responded back with a goal from Reese Johnson, believe it or not, in just his second game in the lineup this season and the first since Montreal. He gets a redirect off of Connor Murphy's shot to tie the game 2-2. That had the score knotted up 2-2 through 40 minutes. And again, not a ton of time was spent at even strength in that second period, but the Blackhawks were right there again against one of the best teams in the entire NHL, a storyline that we're seeing here in the early going. But then, unfortunately, things started to unravel a bit there in the third. The Blackhawks started to crumble. Vegas took a 3-2 lead just 13 seconds into the final period, which is obviously not how you want to come out of the second intermission. The Blackhawks hand the lead right to Vegas. Mark Stone goes on to add the game-winning goal. And then Paul Cotter nets the second PPG of the game for Vegas late to kind of go on and seal the deal. And after the Blackhawks penalty kill had not given up a goal through their first 4 games of the season, they've now given up 3 in the last 2 games. And then the power play also had, I believe, 3 man advantages there in those final 20 minutes and just could not get anything going on any of them. We actually heard the dreaded shoot chants coming from the 300 level at the UC, which, funny enough, I made a post on X during the preseason of how frequently Connor Bedard was trying to shoot the puck. I said, these fans in the 300s are going to absolutely love Bedard on the power play. Turns out that wasn't really the case in this home opener against the Knights. And yeah, the special teams kind of let the Blackhawks down, giving up 2 power play goals in this one. And even though Bedard did get a power play goal early, the Blackhawks go 0 for 4 and weren't able to score on any of their crucial chances there late in the game. They wind up falling in this one 5-3. Corey Perry did go on to add a stat stuffer there late in the third period to make this one look a little bit closer than it was. But the Blackhawks, despite putting together another respectable effort, end up dropping their home opener at the United Center, and that puts them at 2-4-0 through their first 6 games of the regular season. As far as my 3 stars from this one, Blackhawks fans, first, number 1 star of the game has to go to Connor Bedard, right? As I referenced, first game at the United Center, although the Blackhawks did not get the finished product that they wanted, the kid did not disappoint. It was still a night to be excited about, a night that Blackhawks fans who were in attendance, I unfortunately was not able to be there as I was traveling due to a birthday in the family. Some of you may know I talked about that on Saturday's episode. Sad that I couldn't be there at the UC. Sad that the Blackhawks lost, but still a night that Blackhawks fans are not going to forget. Connor Bedard absolutely blows a wrister past Adin Hill. That's, an image that us Blackhawks fans are hopefully going to be seeing for a long, long time. Connor Bedard using that sick release of his to absolutely blow one past an opposing netminder. He gets his first goal at the UC, his second goal of the season. I also thought he did a good job at the faceoff dot, won 50% of his draws, going up against a pretty solid Vegas Golden Knights bunch at the dot, including Jack Eichel, who Connor Bedard was going up against for a decent chunk of this game. And per usual, as we've seen in the early going, he led all Blackhawks forwards with 17 minutes and 26 seconds of time on ice. Second star of the game for me was Connor Murphy. I thought he had his best game here of the early going, even though the Blackhawks did give up 5 goals as a team on defense. Connor Murphy, was only on the ice. He wasn't on the ice for any of them. He was actually a +1 in this game, or might have been on the ice for 1 goal against, but the Seth Jones, Kevin Korchinski pairing was kind of the one that struggled and was on the ice for most of the goals against for Vegas in this one. But like I said, I thought Murphy had his best game here of the early going. He had a primary assist on Reese Johnson's goal, also added 2 hits and led the Blackhawks with 4 block shots, in 18 minutes and 20 seconds of time on ice. These hiccups when I do these podcasts kill me sometimes, folks. But I thought Murphy was just very responsible defensively, a night where the Blackhawks did make some mistakes and blunders in their own zone. I thought Connor Murphy was making the simple plays and getting the puck out of his own end. And to me, was the game that he stood out the most in his own zone and broke up the most amount of plays. So I thought Connor Murphy had a really good game. And then my third star of the game, I could have gone a couple of different directions with this. I guess I could have given it to Corey Perry or could have given it to Reese Johnson for scoring in his second game in the lineup this season. But I actually ended up going with Alex Vlasic, who was Connor Murphy's defensive partner on the night. He was the one who finished +2. I had that confused on accident. Murphy was +1. Alex Vlasic was +2 and not on the ice for any goals against in this one. He only had one hit and one shot, but I just continue to be impressed with this kid and how much of a shutdown defenseman he's already been for the Blackhawks in the early going. Quite honestly, I think Alex Vlasic has been their sturdiest defensive defenseman here in the early going. Always has an active stick, does a really good job of breaking up plays and getting the puck out of harm's way. And I've also liked to see the breakout passes that he's had this year. I think he's kept it simple, but has also been efficient at getting the puck out of his own zone and leading that to puck possession in the other direction for the Blackhawks. So all across the board, I've been really happy with Alex Vlasic's performance this season, and it's really cool to see him blossoming into this really sound defensive defenseman. That was the hope when the Blackhawks drafted him in the second round of the 2019 NHL draft, a pick that I was ecstatic about at the time. Makes it even cooler to see Alex developing into what he is. Alex Vlasic developing into what he is, excuse me. So those were my 3 stars of the game for the Blackhawks. Some of the other takeaways that I had from this one, the bottom 6 continues to do its job well. The second line with Lucas Reichel continues to be pretty quiet, and Connor Bedard's top line has kind of been a little more quiet as well at even strength. The bottom 6 has done a good job chipping in offensively so far here in the early going. Reese Johnson was the one with the goal in this one, and then Corey Perry added the late goal in garbage time as well. And for Perry, he now has 5 points in his first 6 games with the Blackhawks this year. So not only the impact that he brings to the table as a veteran, but he's been helping out offensively as well and is getting chances on the top power play unit too. So love to see a good start here from Corey Perry, new fan favorite, believe it or not, here in Chicago. Got to give a shout out to Ryan Donato as well after he got bumped off of the top line all the way down to centering the 4th line for the Blackhawks. He's still been finding a way to produce here in the early going. He had an assist in this one down on the 4th line. And then on defense, we saw Coach Luke Richardson kind of tinker with the pairings for the first time this season. I referenced Alex Vlasic was skating with Connor Murphy after he had been with Seth Jones for the most part so far. He and Korchinski just actually wound up switching spots in this game. And I wonder if Luke Richardson is going to use those pairings for a couple of games just to see how it goes, or after kind of a night where, like I said, I thought Korchinski and Jones struggled as a pairing. I do wonder if he goes back to Vlasic being alongside Seth Jones, but something to keep an eye on is how long Kevin Korchinski is going to stay there with Seth Jones. And also Wyatt Kaiser was back on his offside again with Jared Tenorti in the lineup. We don't exactly have a feel as to what Luke Richardson prefers so far in the early going. It seems like he's still figuring out whether it's going to be Tenorti and Kaiser on his off wing or Kaiser on the left side with Zaitsev, a natural righty, as the right-handed defenseman. Don't really have an answer to that as of yet, but I do believe Jared Tenorti is starting to earn that spot right now, but definitely something to keep an eye on, not only throughout the course of the season, but especially through these next couple of games with that decision on Kevin Korchinski looming here in just about a week or two. All right, folks, there are my main takeaways from the Blackhawks season home opener loss to the Vegas Golden Knights on Saturday. Coming up in just a moment, I will get into a discussion on the mini forward logjam that Coach Luke Richardson is dealing with Philipp Kurashev nearing his return from injury, and Colin Blackwell not too far along the road apparently as well. But first, I need to talk to you all about Sleeper. The NHL season is finally here. Will the Vegas Golden Knights reign supreme once again? They're off to a 6-0-0 start to the regular season, so it looks like it could be in the realm of possibility. I love the NHL. I love hockey, and I know all of you do as well, and that's why I'm here to talk to you all about Sleeper. Sleeper is my go-to platform for daily fantasy sports, and especially daily fantasy hockey, because with Sleeper, you have the chance to win 100 times your cash on daily fantasy sports, and the NHL has literally never been more exciting with stars like Nathan McKinnon, Cale Makar, Sidney Crosby, Alex Ovechkin, Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, Connor Bedard, and all you have to do with Sleeper is simply select more or less based on the stats listed, such as goals, assists, points, saves, and more. And you can get 100 times your payout if you make the correct picks. Entries can also be made in under 30 seconds, and Sleeper is currently live in 28 plus states. And right now, if you use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL, you'll get up to an $100 match with your first deposit. Again, that's LOCKEDONNHL in all caps for an $100 match, and go and see Sleeper's terms of use for more details. All right, back here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Segment 2, I did want to be sure to talk about kind of the mini forward logjam that the Blackhawks are kind of dealing with already right now, and that could be picking up over the next couple of weeks with Philipp Kurashev and Colin Blackwell potentially returning to the lineup here soon. But first and foremost, since the last episode that I dropped on Saturday morning, the Blackhawks made a little bit of an interesting roster transaction as Cole Gutman was reassigned to the Rockford IceHogs of the AHL prior to Saturday's home opener against Vegas. And quite honestly, Blackhawks fans, this was just not a move that I saw coming, especially considering how well Gutman played at the end of last season, and also considering how the Blackhawks front office really outlined how they were going to give their young players an opportunity to play down the middle here early on in the season. And I just did not see Gutman getting sent down prior to the home opener. Just after 5 games, Cole Gutman is already back down in Rockford. I certainly didn't see that one coming. But what I kind of realized, Blackhawks fans, is this team the front office really didn't have a choice because, and this was something that I've kind of talked about all throughout the offseason. When you think about the additions of Taylor Hall, Corey Perry, Nick Foligno, yes, they were all much needed acquisitions. And I've talked about that as well. The Blackhawks needed to bring in those veteran presence, and they've also done a good job of, holding their own and being productive on the ice here so far as well. But with those guys coming in, it was going to make for an interesting dynamic in terms of, you bring those guys in to probably be playing on a nightly basis, but you also want to be giving youngsters like Cole Gutman and like Boris Tkachuk and like Mackenzie Entwistle, you probably want to be giving those guys opportunities as well, considering, you went and acquired a player like Boris Tkachuk. I know he wasn't the star of that deal from Tampa Bay, but you want to give him an opportunity to see what he has, see if he could be a piece of the future here in Chicago. And based on how he played in training camp and how well he played at the end of last season, he deserved that opportunity. And same with Mackenzie Entwistle. An absolutely phenomenal training camp and preseason, has not disappointed when he's gotten opportunities in the lineup so far, which has kind of been few and far between. You want to be developing those guys, and you know what Taylor Hall, Nick Foligno, and Corey Perry already are. You don't absolutely know what Cole Gutman, Boris Tkachuk, Mackenzie Entwistle, so on and so forth. You don't exactly know what those types of players are, and I just think it's going to make a really interesting roster construction when everyone is healthy. And I know that doesn't happen very often in this sport, but it kind of seems like the Blackhawks are nearing a spot like that right now, because at practice this morning, and since the Blackhawks returned home from their 5-game road trip, we've seen Philipp Kurashev back on the ice after missing those first 5 games due to a wrist injury. He was actually even part of the Blackhawks line rushes during practice this morning. And speaking with the Blackhawks media less than an hour ago, sounds like he's hoping to make his season debut tomorrow night when the Blackhawks take on the Boston Bruins. And then for Colin Blackwell, it sounds like he's still got a little bit of a ways to go. He actually got emotional with the Blackhawks media today, talking about how big of a battle it's been trying to return from that sports hernia surgery that he underwent last spring. And the expectation was that he was going to be fully ready for training camp, but kind of has had some setbacks, and talked about how he's not on schedule at this point in time, but he's a gamer. He's going to be grinding, and seeing him skating at least is a good sign. I'm not going to put a timetable on that, but seeing Colin Blackwell skating these last 2 weeks gives me a feeling that he could potentially be back in the next couple of weeks here. And it's just going to make for a difficult decision for the Blackhawks front office one way or another. Now, of course, timing wise, like I said, it rarely feels like anyone is ever healthy, or everyone's healthy at the same time, I guess I should say. Taylor Hall left Saturday's game against the Vegas Golden Knights early as he re-aggravated that shoulder injury that he suffered against the Boston Bruins, taking a bad hit from Brandon Carlo, who might have to be watching over his shoulder when he comes into the United Center tomorrow night. But anyways, of course, originally Taylor Hall was diagnosed with a week-to-week injury, wound up only missing one game, maybe pushed his luck a little bit and maybe should have sat out a couple of more because it sounds like he's going to be taking the next few off for the Chicago Blackhawks. So with Taylor Hall coming out of the lineup, that's a perfect time for Philipp Kurashev to be jumping back in, but still there's going to come a time where Taylor Hall, hopefully he only misses 2, maybe 3 games here and is able to get back for the Blackhawks. But they're whether it's here, whether it's in 2 weeks, whether it's in a month, there still is going to come a time where the Chicago Blackhawks are going to have to make a crucial decision with their forward group. And I kind of got sidetracked by this whole story that I'm kind of trying to paint here. But one reason that Cole Gutman was sent down, probably not even just one reason, probably the main reason that he was sent down was not only was he healthy scratched the last 2 games, and there were some tough questions as to whether or not he was going to be playing on a nightly basis, but he was also waivers eligible, meaning that another team is not able to claim him if the Blackhawks send him down to Rockford, whereas I believe all 3 of Boris Kachuk, Mackenzie Entwistle, and Reese Johnson would all have to go through waivers to be sent to Rockford, meaning that the Blackhawks would risk losing them if they want to send them to Rockford, and you don't want to lose them for absolutely nothing, especially when all 3 of those guys have gotten off to a pretty good start to the regular season here. So with that just kind of being the case, I want to discuss what this Blackhawks forward group could look like and who is kind of the odd man out when that decision does have to be made. I want to go through the roster real quick. I know we know who's on the Blackhawks roster, but to run through the 13 active forwards right now, it's Taylor Hall, Tyler Johnson, Andreas Athanasiou, Nick Foligno, Corey Perry, Jason Dickinson, Ryan Donato, Connor Bedard, Lucas Reichel, Mackenzie Entwistle, Reese Johnson, Boris Kachuk. Blackwell and Kurashev are currently still on long-term injured reserve. I expect Philipp Kurashev to be removed from that prior to tomorrow's game. Maybe Taylor Hall gets added. We'll have to wait and see on that front. But in terms of those 15 that I just outlined, who do we think are the odd men out here? There probably has to be one odd man out because you can only have 23 players on an active roster. You want to have 14 forwards, 7 defensemen, 2 goaltenders, yada, yada, yada. Out of that group of 15, I think the odd man out has to be probably Reese Johnson or Boris Kachuk. But if I had to pick those 2, and I think Reese adds such a different type of play to the lineup. There is value there, but Boris Kachuk, again, might be a 4th liner of the future based on the way that the flashes that he's shown us recently. I would have to say Reese Johnson is probably the odd man out, but then you have to put him through waivers and you risk losing him. I still think those are probably the 2 guys. Maybe I've thought about this. Maybe you try and see if Colin Blackwell could be of interest to any other NHL team. You'll give him away for future considerations. You're not even asking much. It feels like the Blackhawks almost have one too many forwards for their own good. And that's why I was kind of confused when they signed Ryan Donato this offseason, because it was like, well, where is everyone going to fit in here? And again, I know that rarely everyone is healthy, but it still feels like there's one too many forwards for their own good. So I would have to say, for me, Reese Johnson or Boris Kachuk are the odd man out. And I would even try considering seeing if anyone would have any interest in Colin Blackwell. As far as the forward lines go that I wanted to discuss, obviously Luke Richardson is still tinkering with everything, but for the most part, I do think whenever Taylor Hall is healthy, he's going to get an opportunity to play alongside Connor Bedard all season long. I think it only makes the most sense. That right wing spot is still up for grabs, and in their last game against Vegas, Taylor Radish was the one who got an opportunity there, which I personally love to see, because after kind of a quiet start, I've thought he's strung together some really solid games. But that right wing spot is one of those that are still up for grabs. I think we could see Tyler Johnson there at times. We've already seen Ryan Donato there, obviously. So that one is still up for grabs, but I think you leave Hall and Bedard together for the entirety of the season. The second line, whenever Philipp Kurashev comes back, sounds like it's going to be tomorrow. I expect him to be paired with Lucas Reichel and Andreas Athanasiou. The Blackhawks need to get back to that being their second line, because whatever Richardson has rolled with has not worked here so far this season. The third line goes without saying: Nick Foligno, Jason Dickinson, Corey Perry. That vet line has been phenomenal. And then as far as my 4th line goes, I think you have to have Boris Kachuk and Mackenzie Entwistle in the lineup. I think you just have to. And I know that's easier said than done. And then the last roster spot to me comes down to Tyler Johnson or Ryan Donato. It feels like one of those guys, if everyone is healthy, is going to have to be the odd man out. And Tyler Johnson's off to a great start this season. So I don't see how you're scratching him. So yeah, there's going to be a debate. It feels like on a nightly basis, who is going to be the guy that's going to get healthy scratch? Some nights it's going to be Boris Kachuk. Some nights it's going to be Entwistle. Some nights it's going to be Donato. But I still feel like the Blackhawks have one too many forwards for their own good. And I'm very curious to see how Luke Richardson is going to handle this over the next month. All right, there are my thoughts on the Blackhawks mini logjam in their forward group at the moment. Coming up in just a moment, it's time to get back to our Mailbag Monday fan segment. But first, I got to talk to you all about eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience is what brings home the winning trophy, and it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything that you need to maintain your vehicle and to level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. Plus, with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or you'll get your money back. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and to bring home that win. Again, that's ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. Back here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Again, for those of you who are still tuned in to this point of today's episode, thank you very much. And please make sure to go and smash that like button, comment down below, and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. And also be sure to go and follow Locked On Blackhawks on Instagram. I've been pumping out some really cool Blackhawks related clips, Connor Bedard videos, also just some prospect updates and some segments cut right here live from the show. So be sure to go and follow Locked On Blackhawks on Instagram, if you will, as well. All right, segment 3, Mailbag Monday is back here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast. I do apologize for honestly just kind of forgetting about it recently with all the craziness that's been going on surrounding the Blackhawks with the start of the regular season, and they've been playing weekend games, and I've been traveling each of the last 2 weekends. It honestly just kind of got put on the back burner there for a little bit, which I do apologize for, but glad to have it back here today. And of course, make sure to go and comment down below with your question related to the Chicago Blackhawks, anything Blackhawks related, or just whatever you want to ask me. You can go and comment that down below. You can also go and find the community tab where I have a Mailbag Monday post on the Locked On Blackhawks YouTube channel. You can, of course, go and ask your question there. You can hit me up on any one of my Twitter accounts, or you can email lockedonblackhawks@gmail.com. But getting into Mailbag Monday, the first question that I wanted to answer today comes from @RyanMatheny16 on X, who asked, do you think the good goaltending the Hawks are getting will hold up, or will they eventually regress to the mean? What needs to be done to cut down on the great opportunities our opponents seem to get? So the first part of that question, I've talked about a little bit here on the show. Yes, I definitely do think the Blackhawks goaltending is going to regress. This was something that we saw at the beginning of last season as well, where the Blackhawks got off to a much better start than anyone expected. And everyone was kind of like, hey, maybe the Blackhawks won't be utter dog crap. Maybe they won't be one of the worst teams in the NHL. Turns out they were still one of the worst teams in the NHL. Yeah, I do think just eventually that's going to happen, more so with Peter Mrazek, just because of and I know he's got a purpose to play for this season to prove he's still an NHL starter and an NHL caliber goaltender after all the injuries and everything he's dealt with recently. I do get that, he's probably got a different type of motivation this year, but I still do expect him to not be, saving 92, 93% of the shots that he faced on a consistent basis. I think that's only naturally going to regress some. And I do think Arvid Soderblom has the capabilities to be a fantastic goaltender, but still this early into his NHL career, similar to like all the young defensemen for the Blackhawks, there are going to be hiccups that come along the way. So yes, I do undoubtedly expect the Blackhawks goaltending play to regress back to just more so of an average, because both Mrazek and Soderblom have been standing on their heads thus far, and that really has made a difference and kept the Blackhawks in some of these games, most of these games, against some of the top NHL teams. So I do ultimately expect that to happen here sometime soon. As far as how do we cut down on the great opportunities our opponents seem to get, I think the biggest thing is just handling the surges better. And I know this is tougher to do against, stacked NHL lineups that have Nathan McKinnon and Jack Eichel and Austin Matthews, William Nylander. The Blackhawks are going through the gauntlet right now. Don't forget that. I do think handling the swarms and just, again, something that's easier said than done is just not letting the tumbleweed effect kind of take over. It feels like at times the Blackhawks have been caught in those situations too often. I've also thought they've turned the puck over when they've struggled the most defensively. It's been because they haven't been able to get the puck out of their own end. But again, those are things that are going to happen when you have a whole rookie left side of your defense, basically, in Kaiser, Vlasic, and Korchinski. So those are just learning curves and hiccups and bumps in the road that are naturally going to happen this season. I don't think we can expect them to completely be eliminated and expect the Blackhawks to be a top 10 team in the league. But I do, the hope is that once these guys get more comfortable and more experience and continue to add reps under their belt and all that stuff, so we can limit those opportunities, limit those amount of chances. But I do think here in the early going, it would be tough to have expectations that, this Blackhawks goaltending is going to keep up what they've been doing, and also that the defense is going to be one of the best in the league. There's just going to be some bumps in the road along the way, undoubtedly. Second question is from Shane Elkstall on Instagram, who asked, what do you think about Alex DeBrincat's start here with the Red Wings? Will the Blackhawks regret letting that kid go? Yeah, for those of you who don't know, Alex DeBrincat currently leads the NHL in points and goals. He had a hat trick last night with the Detroit Red Wings and is off to an incredible start with his new team. And you got to be happy for the kid. I mean, Alex DeBrincat, kind of a tough report that's come out of Ottawa recently. And, Senators fans weren't happy about that. But that's the risk that they took, acquiring him from the Blackhawks without having an extension in place. And as far as will the Blackhawks miss him, I think the Blackhawks and their fans will always miss him as long as he's lighting the lamp at a pace that he's capable of. But at the same time, it's going to make it an easier pill to swallow, seeing all the special abilities that Kevin Korchinski has. And the ceiling for him is just so incredibly high because of his skating and offensive abilities. That'll certainly make it an easier pill to swallow, but don't count DeBrincat reunion out. I'm not going to say it's going to happen, but when he's a free agent in 4 years, maybe that works out better with the Blackhawks time frame. I expect they'll probably have some long-term money tied up then, so it'll be a bit more difficult, but I'm not too salty, just happy for Alex DeBrincat. Great to see him doing well, even if it is for the Detroit Red Wings, a team that I do not like watching win. I don't regret getting rid of him considering what the Blackhawks got in return. It made sense at the time because he could have walked for nothing. At Shy Blackhawks FR on X asked, is Korchinski staying with the Blackhawks? No return to junior. I talked about this a couple of days ago on the podcast, excuse me. These next 3-4 games are obviously going to be crucial in that decision, but to me, I think the decision's already been made based on what we've seen from the rest of the defensive core so far. I think Kevin Korchinski is one of the top 4 defensemen for the Chicago Blackhawks right here, right now. The question becomes, how badly do you want to see Isaac Phillips at the NHL level if you're Kyle Davidson? Because if keeping Kevin Korchinski around impacts Isaac Phillips, you feel like you got to cut ties with Nikita Zaitsev potentially, because there's no way that if Isaac Phillips is playing great down in Rockford, he should be getting an opportunity with Chicago. He played really good with the Blackhawks at the NHL level last season. I don't know if that in particular is going to impact whether Korchinski stays or not. But to me, I think Kevin Korchinski is here to stay. And because he's been one of the top 4 defensemen, I think there are bigger issues for this Blackhawks defense right now than Kevin Korchinski, a.k.a. Wyatt Kaiser's gone through some struggles. Nikita Zaitsev's still a pylon. Jared Tenorti is Jared Tenorti. I do wonder if Wyatt Kaiser could be going back to Rockford at some point here, and they call up Isaac Phillips and like Kaiser kind of marinate with the Ice Hogs for a year like they did with Vlasic last season. I feel like that could be a likely situation as well, but ultimately I do think Kevin Korchinski is here to stay based on what he showed us through these first 6 games. Mary D emailed in the podcast and asked, which college prospects could pull a Kaiser and play at the end of the season? I think Frank Nazar, if all goes well for him with the University of Michigan this year, would not be surprised to see him jump up to the NHL level and get some action with the Blackhawks late in the season. Oliver Moore is obviously a curious one, although I personally would only do that if you're 100% sure that he's ready to leave college, because you don't want to rush that kid along too fast. And considering his age, I believe it would only be NHL or back. Maybe that's only a thing with junior. I completely forgot how it works with college. I think he could go down to Rockford. Excuse me. Completely ignore that. But I do think Frank Nazar, Oliver Moore are two to be keeping an eye on. I think Aiden Thompson with the University of Denver is kind of an older college player, could be someone that's ready to make that leap. I do wonder if Gavin Hayes at the conclusion of his OHL season could be ready to make that leap as well. I think Samuel Savoy was probably another guy in that mix, but don't see him playing this season. So I think Frank Nazar and Oliver Moore are probably the two that I'd be keeping my eyes on the most. And then the last question I'm going to answer here today comes from Varun K. Varun, I'm sorry, I did not even want to try to pronounce this last name. I apologize. Varun asked on Instagram, does the tough schedule early give you hope that it'll toughen up the Blackhawks and have them prepared for the rest of the year? Kind of an interesting question. I do think with the juggernaut of the schedule that they've gone through, it's going to help them in terms of being ready for anyone and having to play your best on a consistent nightly basis, or else you're going to be capable of getting blown out of the water. I don't think it's going to change my expectations at all throughout the course of the season, just because this team's so young. There's going to be those nights where they're just not at their A game. That's just going to happen. So I don't think it's going to toughen them up. I do think, though, this especially the tough road trip to open up the year, I do think that's a great team building and bonding experience for these guys to kind of get to know one another and just all that camaraderie and team bonding and all that stuff. It really is important. So I do think that 5-game road trip is going to be crucial for kind of setting the tone as to how tight-knit of a group this is going to be. And it really does seem like it's kind of a family atmosphere. I mean, Nick Foligno's calling Connor Bedard his son out there. So I think that's probably the biggest thing that I'm taking away from this Blackhawks tough schedule and tough road trip early on. It's going to bring the team together and make them one unit. And that's what's going to make them dangerous throughout the course of the season. Them playing together and really not having any expectations. It's kind of just backs against the wall. And if you're sleeping on the Chicago Blackhawks, you shouldn't be, because even though it's not the most talented roster, they have the heart and soul and the unity to come in and beat anyone on any nightly on any game, on any, where was I going with that? I don't know. On any night, they can beat anyone when they play at their best. They're not always going to be playing at their best, but when they do, they've shown us so far. They can hang with the big dogs, and you got to respect that. So that's probably what I've learned, or what I think this early schedule and early gauntlet is going to do for the Blackhawks this year. All right, folks, that is going to wrap up today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks. As always, thank you all again for tuning into the show, and be sure to go and follow Locked On Blackhawks for free right now, wherever you may be listening to your podcast, and to go and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. And that way you can get the latest episode as soon as it becomes available each and every day. As always, thank you all again for tuning into the show. I'm your host, Jack Bushman. You can go and follow me on Twitter at JackBushman2, or on X, or you can go and follow my Strictly Blackhawks account at Talkin' Hockey for all the latest Blackhawks news and updates. So until tomorrow's episode, that's going to do it here for the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.